If you have not been paying attention to the recent statistics on drowning, you just need to be. After decades of decline, deaths by drowning are on the rise. Groups already at higher risk have seen the greatest increase in drowning deaths. This includes adults ages 65 years and older of all race and ethnicities, as well as Black people of all ages. But today we're going to focus on an especially high-risk group, children and particularly autistic children. Drowning is a leading cause of death for children ages 1 to 4. And children with autism spectrum disorder are 160 times more likely to experience non-fatal and fatal drowning than their typically developing peers. Whatever setting you work in, I hope these sobering numbers convince you to pay close attention to water safety. In today's featured journal article, we will look at an aquatic OT swim safety program that you could consider implementing in your community. After we review the study, we will welcome the article's lead author, Erika Kemp, for a discussion on the logistics of launching a swim safety program. We'll also tackle big picture questions like how to go about mobilizing the entire OT profession to prevent drownings in our local communities. So let's dive in. Welcome to the OT Potential Podcast, where we review new and influential OT journal articles, then invite on an expert guest to help us pull out actionable takeaways that you can implement in your practice starting today. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Lyon, OTRL. And before we dive into this important topic of OT and swim safety, I wanted to let you know that this podcast may qualify as continuing education for you. You are probably listening to this podcast on a free podcast platform. But to gain CEU credit, you will need to be a member of the OT Potential Club, our OT continuing education platform. So bearing in mind that this could count as a CEU course, I want to state our 2 learning objectives so you can be thinking about them throughout the podcast today. Our first learning objective is you will be able to identify assessments that you can utilize in aquatic OT for autistic children. And second, you will be able to recognize group interventions that can be utilized in aquatic OT for autistic children. So let's begin by looking at this journal article, and then we will bring on Erika to discuss how this could play out in your practice. The article that we are reviewing today is called Addressing Swim Safety in Autistic Children, a pilot feasibility study using aquatic occupational therapy. It comes to us from the International Journal of Aquatic Research and Education, and it was published in 2023. So the article begins with this intro to swim safety and autism. We know that formal swim lessons are effective at reducing drowning rates. Group instruction is the most cost-efficient way to provide swim lessons. However, for autistic children who are at a much greater risk of drowning, parents have reported that group lessons are less successful. This is likely because group lessons do not take into consideration the unique learning needs and differences of autistic children. In recent years, we have seen more and more literature focus on developing swim skills in autistic children. These articles have promoted approaches like applied behavioral analysis, aquatic exercise, aquatic occupational therapy, and the Halawick concept. But there is still not a definitive, agreed-upon approach for specialized instruction. And this is where the role of occupational therapy can potentially come in. Occupational therapy professionals are already trained in developmental skill acquisition, motor learning, sensory processing, and behavioral theory. This training can pair well with the Halawick concept, which considers both the motor and psychosocial aspects of learning to swim by first addressing comfort in the water and then focusing on gaining control of balance, ultimately leading to independent movement. This approach allows for one-on-one support, but within a group setting. So what was the intent of this particular research? Given the importance of teaching swim skills to autistic children and the ability of occupational therapy professionals to do so, the authors sought to answer, 1, is group-based aquatic OT a feasible intervention for increasing swim skills in autistic children? And 2, what are the parents' perceptions of the instructional methods and results? So what were their methods to answer these questions? This was a mixed methods pilot study. Quantitative data on change in swim skills was collected using standardized assessments, and qualitative data was collected via parent reporting. So who were the participants? 8 autistic children, ages 3 to 7, participated in this study, along with their caregivers. The assessments that were utilized were the Water Orientation Test, ALYN 2, that's ALYN, ALYN, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Next was goal attainment scaling, the sensory profile, and parent interview. These assessments were completed with the occupational therapist, and 3 to 4 individualized goals were created for each child based on parent goals, their scores from the water orientation test, and clinical observation. So, what did this group-based OT entail? Group-based occupational therapy was provided 1 time per week over 10 weeks. Sessions occurred in a warm water pool located at a local school for children with developmental disabilities. Each individual participant was paired with a swim buddy, who was a current OT or PT student who had completed their pediatric coursework. The swim buddies individualized intervention under the guidance of 2 occupational therapists. Each session lasted 45 to 60 minutes, and each child had an individualized visual schedule. The flow of the sessions kind of looked like this. It began with a group song for water acclimation and to signify the start of therapy, 2 to 3 minutes of water adjustment, group instruction on the swim skill of the week, 30 minutes of rotating between stations, a group song at the end to signify the end, and then parent education and discussion about the progress towards goals. The general progression of skills was as follows. There was water acclimation leading to blowing bubbles/breathing control, leading to floating on the front and back, leading to kicking, and ultimately leading to locomotion skills. Safety skills were also taught and consistently reinforced. These included not entering the water before the swim buddy gave the safe word, turning around in the water and getting back to the side of the pool, entering and exiting the water, and performing a back float to rest if fatigued. So what was the result of this group intervention? All 8 participants finished at least 8 of 10 sessions, and furthermore, all participants increased their total score on the water orientation test, and 4 met the criteria for minimal detectable change. 81% of the individual goals set were met or exceeded. 3 main themes, as well as several sub-themes, were identified in the parent interviews. There is a mapping of these themes that is found in the article that I thought was really handy. But for the purposes of this overview, I'll just say that the 3 main themes were just these overall benefits of participation. Second, the value of having an OT in the water for these lessons. And third, gaining these specific acquired skills that were both social, sensory, and related directly to swim. So headed into the discussion of this paper, given that all 8 children tolerated the intervention with good adherence, the study demonstrated that this particular aquatic OT program is feasible to carry out with autistic kids. Aquatic occupational therapy services often are not covered by insurance, but this study put forth a viable method of delivering these services in a cost-effective manner, with 1 OT overseeing instruction of 8 children. That said, due to the small participant numbers in this cohort study, the results are not easily generalizable, and more research should be done. An important learning was that the water orientation test may not be sensitive enough to measure change in children with no prior water experience. So there's actually a version 1 of this test that should be considered instead. So headed into the conclusion, the authors state that the need for aquatic interventions for autistic children is evident, and occupational therapy practitioners should be considered as resources to help meet this need. Okay, that wraps up our review of this article. There was so much that I learned in this article. It really helped me sync the anecdotal needs and stories I see in my community with just a new level of the statistics of some of the barriers to getting swim lessons, the effectiveness of them. And I am just so thankful to be joined today by the article's lead author, Erika Kemp, OTD, OTRL, BCP, FA, OTA. Erika is a board-certified pediatric occupational therapist with expertise in aquatics. She has a bachelor's degree in occupational therapy from Ohio State, a post-professional master's from Boston University, and a post-professional doctorate from Indiana University. Erika worked in school, community, and medical pediatric settings before moving into academia. She has worked in both OTA and OT academic programs as a fieldwork coordinator, capstone coordinator, and now serves as the interim program director of the OTD program at The Ohio State University. Her primary professional area of interest is supporting students and educators in the use of evidence-based practice, as well as innovative ways to push occupational therapy into the community. She has an active line of research looking at how aquatic therapy increases participation in daily life and prevents drowning for children with disabilities. So without further ado, I will patch Erika onto this podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Erika. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this.
I am so thankful that you're here and for the work you've been doing. I look at these numbers and I'm frankly blown away by them, by the trending of the statistics, specifically the numbers around autism. And I guess on one hand, I'm blown away, but on the other hand, anecdotally, I know those stories. I know the impact on community. So it also, I don't know, gives new language to what I've been just seeing in my community. And I don't know, it makes me think about it differently and our role as OTs. And I'm really just thankful that you're here to dive into it. I want to start with how this journey began for you. How did you become interested in this back in the day before we saw these increases in numbers? You thankfully started so early in this. How did that happen for you?
Yeah. Well, I grew up around water, was a swimmer myself, was a pool manager, swim instructor, swim coach, you name it. And my first job as an OT was in a school practice. And then I was also the high school swim coach. And the more I started talking to the families of the kids, the more I started to realize that they would love to get their kids in the water. And I was lucky enough to be connected with a therapist doing some aquatic therapy in that very first job back out in Kansas City. And started kind of shadowing with that therapist and learning all about what we think of as traditional aquatic therapy, using the water and the therapeutic properties to enhance our therapy sessions, putting kids in this different environment and all the amazing things we could do there. And then from there, families started to ask, well, can you just teach my kid to swim? Can you just give us some private lessons? And I thought, oh, well, yeah, I can do that. So along with this amazing mentor and seeking out some continuing education, I just started working with families on the side at their own pools in the summer. And from there, started to realize that I was addressing swim safety and swim skills and not just sensory processing or motor skills or anything. I was also doing this other really important occupation. And the more I started doing it, the more I realized that the gains these kids were making in swim skills was more because of my background as an OT, not just my swim instruction experience, because these families would be wanting me to continue and saying, well, they've done more with you than they've done in whatever swim lesson they were involved in before. And so that was the first time I really started thinking about how is this different? And this was back in the early 2000s. And then just as my practice grew, started putting more and more kids in the water as families were comfortable with that, kind of trying to figure out where is this connection between swim safety and swim instruction and occupational therapy and aquatic therapy? And where do they overlap and where do they not? And what is this whole new thing? And so from there, this group idea just evolved and used to offer it at an outpatient in a hospital setting in a group, a private pay group. And then when I came to Ohio State, was able to really expand it and think a little bit more critically about it.
I can see that early interest in aquatic OT and just your own personal interests. And I love how those came together. I guess I'm curious, do you think of the program now as primarily aquatic OT or swim safety?
I think that's an excellent question. And I think that the answer is really evolving. I think that I feel that it really is aquatic occupational therapy. I think that I'm doing occupational therapy. I am looking at an occupation that kids and families want to be involved in, and I'm figuring out where are the participation limitations, where are the client factor pieces that need to be scaffolded to enable participation in this really important. I mean, how many families go on a vacation or do something in the summer that doesn't involve water? Whether that's just going to a creek, a splash pad, a beach vacation, a pool, something like that. And so I really think about it as occupational therapy. Our typical swim instruction approaches work really well for our quote-unquote typical kids. But if you think about it, the majority of the kids OTs are working with need some sort of IEP or 504 to help them learn a new skill. And swimming is a motor skill. And so I don't think what I'm doing with swimming is any different than teaching a kid how to tie their shoes or how to use a fork and a spoon. That those are cognitive, motor, sensory skills needing to come together to participate in this occupation. And I think that the same thing is true of swimming. And so I think also the approach I've sort of created here and from multiple people helping me along the way is really occupational therapy more than here's a set swim curriculum that we're going to teach you this way, this way, this way. We're really following the kids' needs and helping incorporate a lot of play to help them engage in something that they want to do. Most kids come running into the pool. They're so excited to be there.
How did the program described in this paper come to be? Yeah, I loved reading about the different components of it. Yeah, how did you get from that early interest to this program and starting to research it?
Yeah. So I came into academia at Ohio State in 2015. I was like, I never would have seen myself here in this position. I never thought I would be doing research. I never thought I would be in academia. I think you just stay open to opportunities that are available to you and you just make the best of them. So I came here as the fieldwork coordinator. And when I started, our local county Board of Developmental Disabilities was looking for a consultant in the world of PT, OT, APE for how to use their warm water pool more effectively. It's embedded into their school, 14 to 21-year-olds, community transition type of school. And so I started consulting with their aquatic staff on how can they get their kids in the water? What are the skills they can work on in the pool that are going to translate to transitions, right, into community living and into jobs? And then realized that, so that was mostly the older 14 to 21, hired some students to work with me as aquatic aides out there, gave them really great hands-on training, as well as bringing that therapeutic piece into the current aquatic aides. And then realized that their pool was empty most afternoons. And I was like, well, we could see younger kids here because the county serves kids of all ages. Just this school was only 14 to 21. And so worked with them with, can I have some evening time? And pulled a student in, Rebecca Woodson, who is one of the authors on the paper. This was a lot of her research specialization. And then Maria Baldino, the other author, the paper was here as a lecturer at the time. And so the three of us just kind of started to put this into a research protocol. Taking the program that I'd been doing and then operationalizing this as a research study. How can we show that occupational therapy practice is effective? And what are we actually affecting? Then I begged a bunch of students to help me. And so that first group of 8 students that we walked in to do this, that this paper is based on, we just jumped in and started trying things. We had a basic structure out there, and I did some training with each of them on what to do at each of the stations. Training with them on this assessment tool called the WODA, and it worked. We got in the water. We found families to join us, and we did this for 10 weeks. We had a great time. Discovered that the students loved it, the kids loved it, the families loved it, and it was like, well, let's keep going. And so we started again that next spring. This was in 2020, and of course that was COVID. Then there was a giant pause in everything, in research, in swim. Pools were shut down. Lifeguards weren't being trained. Swim instructors weren't being trained. And so I think that's where some of the increased drowning incidence is coming from, because there was a lot just societal pause on aquatic activity. And so that's why the paper didn't get published until 2023, just because of the I was fieldwork at the time and capstone, and every student was kicked out of fieldwork, and we had a lot of stuff that we were working on in the meantime. So that's kind of how it all started, and it has progressed since then. There are some small differences that we've implemented in the program since we first started it, but it's essentially still in the same place.
Yeah. Erika, I'm so interested in you and your story, because what I'm hearing is you were on this path because you were following your interests. Things kind of came your way and you said yes to it. And you kind of became the leader of this movement without knowing like the importance of it, or like the national importance of it at the time, and the statistics we were going to be seeing around safety and drowning and just like this really weighty topic. How has that felt for you, just like stepping into this leadership role when you weren't anticipating doing so? Or it sounds to me like you weren't.
No.
What's been your experience?
I was not anticipating that this would be such, as you said, important and thrown into sort of the limelight. I really have been doing this because I've been passionate about it. And then it was after I developed the program and convinced students to jump in the water with me that we realized that this is an actual problem. Like, I think I knew it was a problem that families couldn't find swim lessons. But then when you get into the statistics, it makes it that much more important. And I think that's where my passion to empower OT practitioners to try doing something, even a small step of having the conversation with your families, is so important. I think that we are often overlooked as professionals, and this is a space that we've never really stepped into, but there's such an opening for a role here. And we've since also started a community of practice with American Occupational Therapy Association, just kidding, because I think there's a lot of OTs out there dabbling in this, but we don't have a space to talk about it. And if you look at physical therapy, they have an aquatic section and a journal, and recreational therapy has a section and a whole space. APE is going to obviously be talking about this, but we're not talking about this. And I think there is such potential for us to leverage our skills in this area.
Looking at this paper specifically, as you said, you were working on this 5 years ago, or it feels like in the past. As you revisit it for this conversation, what's standing out to you? And is there anything that you would add to it for us? Like, I know you've continued to research. Yeah, what stands out to you as you're reading it now that you want us to know about?
It's funny because I forgot everything we had done with this paper. So when I went back and read it, I was like, oh, we're still doing a lot of these things. We've just refined things. Number one, we've discovered 8 was a little too many kids in the water.
Oh, yeah.
So we sort of settled at 6 was a good number.
Yeah.
4 is real quiet. 8 is a little much. 6 is that sweet spot. We've also really embraced these standardized tools, the WOTA, Water Orientation Test Allen. I think one of the things that I like about that one is that it allows you to talk about the quality of the swim skill versus a swim skills checklist from another swim instruction type approach is the skill present or not? But we, in our therapy language, are often talking about with min assist, with a verbal cue, with a gesture, how do we scaffold that skill? And I think that the standardized tools allow us to be able to talk about swimming in that manner, which kind of helps with that translation into that this is actually therapeutic, what we're doing. I also think that the goals, we initially did not use the COPM. And so using that OT tool, the COPM, with the caregivers to help establish what are those goals that are most important to the caregiver, allows you to be able to set not just swim skill goals, but goals about safety on deck, goals about learning who the lifeguard is and what their job is, goals about social interaction with the other kids in the water. That seems to be such an enriching piece of what we're doing. Some of the other things we've done is we've expanded to there's now 8 possible stations that kids could rotate through instead of just 6. We added some in the deep end because some of those kids are ready to learn and need to be where they can't touch in order to learn some of those skills, like treading water, submerging in over their heads to be able to come back up. And I think some of the other things that we're starting to figure out that we knew is that one session isn't enough for kids. They really need more than, not everyone. Some kids, 10 sessions and they're good. But really to get to what the Red Cross considers water competent, it might take more than one round. So these are some of the things that we're continuing to research with the program. What are the characteristics of the kids that maybe only need one dose? What are the characteristics of the kids that need multiple doses? Who's ready to move into that deep end and who's not? And then anecdotally, some of the things we're doing is trying to really push kids into typical lessons, onto swim teams. Synchronized swim has been another really great thing. Like, we're just one piece of the continuum of care. And figuring out where does this program fit? Where do we as occupational therapy practitioners fit? And how do we facilitate kids moving through that whole sort of continuum of swim lessons?
I have so many logistical questions I want to ask about this. And I want to start with parent education. From what I'm reading, parent education and learning water safety is a really important part of, or it's not just the swimming skills, it's also the education about water safety. And I've been talking to parents at the ballpark, after reading this paper, I'm talking to parents at the ballparks, and I'm really realizing about myself that I feel like I'm not very skilled at talking about something where the risk is drowning, like those other motor skills you mentioned earlier, like tying shoes or handwriting. It is a motor skill like that, but the risk associated with it and the fear it spikes is so different. I almost felt I was thinking of the word fear mongering. I don't want to be fear mongering as I'm talking about that. How do you balance those conversations? I feel like in my OT work, I'm not accustomed to sharing stats like this. These stats are startling.
It absolutely is. And I think that, we're used to OT being no one's going to die if they get OT.
Yes.
They don't get OT.
Totally.
Right? And I think those people that are feeding therapists are probably a little more comfortable with this because there's food and liquids going in the mouth in that type of environment as well. Or those maybe doing early mobility in ICU where they're hooked up to a lot of different lines and tubes. And those are very specific areas of practice, right? And so now we're talking about how do we talk about this in a community setting? And I think it is a very delicate balance. I think that caregiver education and empowerment to help with drowning prevention is so key. There are really simple things that we teach parents and caregivers to do, siblings, aides, whoever's coming with that child, to recognize signs of distress. We teach all of our kids and the caregivers. So caregivers get in the water in week 10, the last week, and we teach the caregiver all the ways we hold the child, all the cues that we use. And one of the stations everyone rotates through, which is new since this paper, is how to pull each other out of the water. So we use the guard tube, and we teach them how to sit on the edge of the pool, throw the tube to the child or the caregiver, whoever's turn it is, because they take turns on both sides, and then to pull them back in. And we make it a game. But we use the actual tool of the red tube with the red cross on it so that they know if someone throws this to me, I grab it. And then teach them that it's okay that they're going to start to move when that tube moves and to hold on the whole time. And so we start to teach them about the job of a lifeguard. What does the guard do on deck? Why are they sitting in these chairs? What is the sound of the whistle like? And if you hear that, what do? You freeze. So all of these elements are built into all of the weeks that we work with the kids. We give the parents a lot of education, point them to National Drowning Prevention Alliance, point them to the American Red Cross, U.S. boating safety, all of these kinds of things. And then we also talk about using a water watcher. And so this is, again, one of the steps in drowning prevention is just having someone that's watching the water with whoever you're out at, right? The lifeguard, they're doing something too, but kind of also having that water watcher. And so, yes, it's really scary, but it's such an important thing that people need to learn how to swim, all people. And then also going with that are those tools that they can use. And then other little things, like if you have multiple kids, dress them all in the same color swimsuit. right? Put them all in bright pink. Try to stay away from the teals and the blues because that's going to blend into the watercolors. But really wearing those colors that are going to pop and putting them in similar things so you know what to look for. Using a water watcher, being aware of the sounds of distress and knowing that drowning actually is silent. We all associate it with being someone's yelling and calling and splashing, but actually it's most often happens silently. And so it's kind of watching what's going on with the kids that I'm with, the people that I'm with, knowing what their normal play behaviors are like, and being able to keep an eye out for that. So it can be really scary, but balancing that with the things that we can do, for sure.
Yeah, as a parent, when my kids were 2 to 3, drowning at home was a big fear of mine.
Sure.
And I feel like I just was fearful of it, but try not to think about it. And I can see the helpfulness of gaining more knowledge about what I can be teaching and what my role is too. Who's a good fit for this program? Or when you said everyone runs towards the water and enjoys it, I can also imagine kids that don't want to do that. In the different iterations that you've done, who's a good fit? And are there kids you recommend towards that individual lesson instead?
Yeah. So we have not excluded anyone from our program except those that have compromised breathing, so an open trach or uncontrolled seizures, because then you have real difficulties that you need to be medically aware of. And we do see all kids make progress, even those that are minimally verbal. However, some kids need longer or more exposure. We have had those kids that are so scared to enter the water. So if we find that some of the most important things seem to be early, fun, positive water exposures for kids under the age of 4. So fun in the bathtub is important. Splash pads, sprinklers, zero entry pools, being held by a parent in the water, all of these things before you even really start to introduce any sort of swim skills, all of those things are really important. For kids that haven't had those, if they first come in and they won't get anywhere near the water, those kids we will move to more of an individual session because it's too overwhelming for them to have the fear of the water and to have 5 other kids and all these stations and games and songs that can be very overwhelming from a sensory perspective. So fearful kids, just depending on how fearful they are or how young they are, we may start them individually versus in this group. And then we have our kids that are seeking sensory input. And the properties of the water, the deeper you go, the more proprioception you get. And some of our seekers are they constantly are going under the water, under the water, under the water. So that's a different type of safety issue, right? So for those kids, they don't recognize when they're running out of breath. And then because they're in fight or flight, they have no motor planning abilities to figure out how to come back up. And so we'll put those kids in the group and really have a one-on, obviously everyone's got a one-on-one, but really teaching for them the approach is teaching them catch a bubble of air, go down, jump back up, and really breaking that task down. I don't think this is where we started with this question, but we accommodate all types of kids in our group. The kids that are really fearful or who have never had water exposure tend to do better starting individually, but most other kids do well in the group. It's amazing what that peer modeling does that I didn't even anticipate. Being able to see other kids. Sometimes we'll have kids go together to stations to rotate around the pool, especially if they really are very social. Other times we'll keep them independent so they have their own space at a station, but they can see what someone's doing across the way. And then we always have group activities embedded where they can model each other, engage in group games together, sing together. So it's really customizable, I think, to each individual kid. And that is really due to the skill of the swim buddies, I think. And then having that OT there, that's what we do, right? We grade and adapt, we match occupations. And I think it's so innate in the way we think that we, again, undersell ourselves sometimes.
I'm already so sold on the need and importance of this work and the fit of OT. I just see how it works. I want every community to have this. So I want to ask about logistics of making this happen. I want to start with making the program happen, and then move into some questions around like funding and where that fits in different business models. If I'm like, okay, I'm an OT, I'm in my small town in rural Nebraska. My 3 questions I want to ask to you about the program are, what training do I need to do to be ready to launch this? Can I get more information on the specifics of this program? Like, can you just tell me what you've been doing and then I can riff on it? And I know right away that based on being in rural Nebraska, I don't have a pool of OT students. What are my options for the one-on-one help? Is it a caregiver? Is it lifeguards? Is it, I don't know. That's a lot of questions to throw at you, but there's 3 to get me going on starting my program.
Right. So training, I think some sort of water safety instruction course. If you want to actually offer the whole program, you need to be a comfortable swimmer. And then I think you do need to know how does swimming develop, right? How do we get from breath control to mastering our buoyancy in the water to moving through the water? And there are tons of water safety instructor types of courses out there. Just a couple, and this is not an exhaustive list, American Red Cross, the YMCA, Ellis has one, Swim America. These are just a few of them. I think once you kind of have an understanding of how kids learn to swim, then an OT or OTA license really provides you the lens to grade and adapt those skills and instruction techniques to your individual clients. I don't know that you really need any additional training in aquatic therapy per se for swim safety. I think it's really about swim instruction in your OT brain coming together. There's also a new community of practice that I'm helping co-facilitate through American Occupational Therapy Association, specific to aquatic occupational therapy. And membership's open to any AOTA member, and it's hosted through the Child and Youth SIS. That'd be another place you could go just to connect with others trying to start this and think about, well, what have they done? But I think essentially it's some kind of water safety instruction, potentially lifeguarding, so that you can recognize the signs of distress, but definitely swim skill progression, and then your OT or OTA license. As far as what we've been doing in our specific program, we are going to publish the manualized protocol definitely before next, March, April 2025. We haven't quite figured out how or where yet, but I want to get this out. I want people to use it. I don't want it to be stuck with me here in Central Ohio. I think that this is something that can be used by people everywhere. So in the meantime, because I don't have a publication for the actual protocol yet, people can visit our blog, our Instagram, or they can email me directly, and I'm happy to have those conversations about what exactly is it that we're doing. I do have a shell of some things that I can share out now. I just don't have the full protocol ready for people just yet. I think there's lots of ways this can be adapted for a small town. I used to use my high school swimmers as the swim buddies. When I was first doing this, before I came to Ohio State, I had volunteers get in the water that needed volunteer hours for National Honor Society or for their church or whatever it was. And so I needed to make sure that they were comfortable with swimming. And then I would give these individuals some basic information about autism, about behavior as a communication form, and about really recognizing distress, right, in kids. Just some basics. And then enough to know that, oh, something's going wrong. Erika, I need you over here, right? So I think that it can be done with volunteers. I think parents work really well, or caregivers, siblings. Sometimes with that, you'll see kids may not try. You'll get one or the other. They may not try as many new things if they're with the parent, or they show off all the time for the parent, right? So it could go either way. I think having some sort of then either swimmer or high school lifeguard is another option, because then they have that swim background and understanding of what to look for. And then it's, again, just giving them a little bit of information about behavior as communication and how to really follow the lead of the child, really following what is the child's strengths, and then how are we going to use that to our advantage. I think the OT or OTA has to circulate a little bit more often into each dyad in the water. The way we currently are running it is I stay at a station called Individualized Skills. And so everyone rotates through that station with me, and I can help make those adjustments, give a little bit more information or tips or try new things. Whereas and I know that those students then, they have those stations are pretty standardized what they're doing. If you're not comfortable being at one place but want to be able to circulate, you could just eliminate that station and circulate with the kids that maybe need that a little bit more. While I am not sure, I don't think progress would be as quick if you're not using OT students, potentially, because those students or PT students are really skilled. But I do think it would be still a valid approach and worth doing. Something is better than nothing, in my opinion.
When I think of funding, or this is a program where you need liability insurance, there's people's time you need to cover, there's a lot of logistical things to think through. I'm seeing two avenues as I'm an outpatient clinic. I can see this at our small town outpatient clinic. We're an outpatient clinic. We want to offer this as a summer program. I could see that as an avenue. I could also see myself being like, this is my passion project. I'm going to start a nonprofit and grant fund it. And we're just like a swim safety, like a small nonprofit. Are those the models that you see for it working? Or is there a model I'm not thinking of?
Yeah, no, I think both of those would be great. So summer group programming in outpatient clinics, parents are always looking for some sort of summer group, right? So we currently do a 10-week group. Evidence seems to suggest 8 hours at a minimum, so you could shorten that to 8 weeks to fit into a summer. 6 is going to be good, but not quite there, right? And so I think if you're an outpatient private practice, it's thinking about what pool are you going to partner with and what agreements do you put in place? Are you using their lifeguards? Who has the balance of liability on which side, right? So, lifeguards are there and trained to help prevent drowning. And so the pool can help provide some of that. And this would all go in your agreement that you would use, that we would create with that pool, right? And then you would have the liability for the OT piece, right? And for anything in relation to that. Summer groups are often a private pay model. Group therapy is covered at a pretty low reimbursement rate, unfortunately. But also thinking about things like locker space and that kind of thing too, when you're looking for a pool. And then, as a private practitioner, a nonprofit, and that could be a private practice that's a nonprofit. Again, thinking about what pool are you using? Is it a private pool? Is your professional liability covering then also as a lifeguard? Do you have separate insurance as a lifeguard as well? And probably get that certification and maintain it if you're not using a pool that has lifeguards in place. So I've done these kinds of things in partnerships with a YMCA. I've also done them at a hotel pool, and I've also done them like at someone's private pool, like in their backyard kind of thing.
Oh, whoa.
So I think it's all thinking through what's most accessible for me, what am I most comfortable with, and how is that liability going to be split up between therapy, lifeguard, and then, general liability. Someone slipped and tripped on the way in, right? I think if you're a private practice, if you're a nonprofit, mm-hmm. There's a lot of opportunities for grant funding, I think
so too.
It is a very real public health problem, drowning. It has gone up since the pandemic. And again, I think a lot of that is because pools were closed. And there was this period of 2 to 3 years where there just wasn't aquatic activity happening. There were no lifeguards trained. There were no lessons happening unless you were at a private for-profit type of entity. A lot of the community centers weren't doing stuff. And I think, health promotion and prevention really fits in OT's scope of practice. And I think that a lot of us have the ability to put this into words, to get some grants, maybe from a local foundation, or even from other families that are looking for a place to help support. So many families, they're already paying for so many out-of-pocket therapies and extra things that this could potentially be just one more, right? And so if there's a way to help offset some of that cost through grant funding or donations so that you can make it equal to what a regular swim lesson might cost. And that's where I'm really passionate about getting this protocol out there, because I want this to be accessible and to get everyone talking about this, because we can really help change what's happening out there.
I can totally see OTs doing this. I can see this expanding. I have to admit, I feel a little like, I don't want to use the word anger, but like I see that this is going to take a lot of individual efforts by a lot of individual OTs. When I'm hearing like the risks and the importance, I think it should be covered by insurance. That's the recommendation that I read on some public health website. It was like, as soon as you're diagnosed with autism, before you get PT, before you get OT, get your child into swim lessons. Do you think there is a reality where there's a broader movement, or is it just up to our individual efforts? I don't know. Do you hear any rumblings about something more systematic?
So I think that we need to start to create that, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm seeing kids one-on-one, I have billed insurance using therapeutic activity. I don't usually use the aquatic therapy CPT code because if you read the definition of that, it's really about using the properties of water for therapeutic exercise for things people can't do on land. That's really different than what I'm doing. I'm really doing neuromuscular reeducation, therapeutic activity, some self-care stuff. Pre-post pool is the perfect time to address showering, bathing, dressing, all of those really functional skills. And so in a one-on-one setting, if you're not doing the group, I really think that you can bill insurance and you just need to talk about what are those underlying skill deficits to go to a medical model language, because that's what billing is going to want, that you're addressing through this occupation-based intervention. I think the group can go towards the group CPT code potentially, but again, I think it's about how we talk about it, how we talk about our skills, the skill of the therapist, and what we're doing. We're not just having kids blow bubbles, blow bubbles, blow bubbles, right? We're encouraging them to blow ducks across the water, to use straws, to make bubble monsters. There's so many different ways that we're embedding this into play, and using child-led, play-based, and then really that Rolodex of treatment ideas that all of us occupational therapy practitioners have, and how we scaffold that activity. So I think that how do we get this so that it is billable to insurance is a really important question. And I think that the more of us that have the conversation, the more we can start to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, working in adult rehab, like so often you gear towards like, this is preventing falls. Like that's a language that you use. And
Right.
This feels, or I see some parallels where we're preventing drowning. It's the highest cause of mortality for this age group. Like,
yeah,
this should be reimbursed. This should be reimbursed. Like, period.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that comparison. That's a great point. Yeah.
This is going a little outside of the work that you're doing, but I really, just in reading the statistics, I wanted to ask you about this and end on this kind of broader question. The highest risk of drowning seems to be 0 to 4. That's before, like maybe a little overlap with your program. As OTs, we're seeing a lot of those kids as EI therapists. We have those connections. What's our role in that 0 to 4 age group?
Yeah. So I think it's hard in a way because even our earlier intervention therapists aren't seeing all the kids all the time, right? We're really in this different approach. But I think through that coaching families approach can be really important just to provide information and education. So most drownings in the 1 to 4 happen in the bathtub. And so it's really about parent education and starting with simple breath control activities, helping kids understand how to blow out, how to blow things across the water in the bathtub where they feel really safe and can be grounded, and educating parents about these simple games that you can play in the bathtub, and then also thinking about this as a water watcher situation, right? And I think it's really common and real easy to be like, oh, I'll be right back, right? And let the kid's fine, they're sitting up, they're 2, no, they can sit on their own, no problem. When drowning can happen so quickly, in less than a minute. And so really, as the therapist, reinforcing to parents and families caregivers, whoever it is, about the safety around bath time, the safety in the water when they do go as a family. And I think that's a great community outing for an EI therapist to go on. Let's go out to your pool. Let's go see, what does this look like? How would you keep your child safe in a locker room that doesn't have gates on either side, so that especially if they're at risk of elopement? Where should you enter and exit the pool? Where should you sit so that you can be close to your stuff, but still get into that pool easily in and out? I think that's a great community outing, and EI is all about seeing kids in their natural environments, right? I think in preschools, if you are in any kind of Head Start program or any kind of daycare or any just therapeutic, school-based preschool, that's another great place. A lot of therapists send summer packets home with their kids and just adding like one sheet of paper about, here's how to keep your kids safe at the pool. And I think to kind of avoid some of that fear mongering, it may not be drowning prevention education. It might be safe water activities. Here's how to stay safe in the pool here, and putting it in that positive spin, like we need to do so much in a community. The other thing that I've seen really helpful is distributing lists of questions to families with what they should ask adaptive swim providers. So if they are going to look for lessons, asking them really specifically, is your curriculum individualized? How many kids are in the water? How can you adapt? What do you actually do to adapt your lessons? Some places won't be able to answer fully those questions. And so that's important then for the parents to be like, well, who's able to really answer my questions about this if I am seeking services? And who just they're not real sure. And in those kind of places, if that's all you have, there's a perfect opportunity for an occupational therapy practitioner to consult. Well, why don't I go with your kid to that first lesson and help figure out, how can we really make this work for you in this space that's available to you? So I think social media is the other place, right? A lot of us out there have social media accounts, and there's a lot of young families a lot of young moms turning to the TikTok and the Insta and the Reels, the real short snippets. And so maybe if you're a person that's a social media influencer, how can you add a little education to your information, especially in that April-May timeframe as we're gearing up for summer? Just a blip about being a water watcher, what to look for, how to help facilitate bubbles and breath control, and how to talk to a lifeguard, how to introduce your kid to the lifeguard at a place like that. So there's just some things that I thought of. I'm sure there's a lot more, but place to start.
Yeah. And there's so many materials out there that are already made for us to draw on. I love thinking about creating more from the OT lens, and with our community and network, I could really see those getting distributed for sure.
Right. The National Drowning Prevention Alliance actually has some really great family-friendly videos already created that you can point people to, and you don't have to recreate the wheel by any means.
Yeah. This whole conversation has gotten my mind just turning on so many things about the importance of safety throughout the lifespan. We've talked about mostly kids, but I think this is something for all OTs to be thinking about and considering, like what this means for their practice and for their community. What do you want to leave us on today? We've touched on so many things. What's top of mind now for you?
I want to empower occupational therapy practitioners, OTs and OTAs alike, to have a voice in this space. I feel like we are valuable and have so much to offer. I think if you think about this as a life-saving skill and lifelong occupation that we can promote participation in for our clients and families, you can see how this absolutely fits in our wheelhouse. And I think it's starting slow, having the conversation with the families you already interact with, as you're doing, even whether that's out in your regular life on a daily basis at the ballpark, at the pool, or with your clients. I think, just what's one small step you as an OT practitioner can take now, whether that's getting to know your community's water instruction sites, having a conversation with a family, consulting for 1 or 2 kids on your caseload, and just pointing people to existing resources. I think that there's a space for all of us, from one thing all the way through to becoming an instructor in this manner.
Well, Erika, I'm so thankful for your leadership here. I hear this story of how this started for you and has taken you on an unexpected journey, and how that's just like met with this big global important need. So I'm so thankful for your work and for this journey you've been on and for being here to share with us today.
I appreciate the opportunity to inspire others. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, you all, I am so thankful that you were here to be a part of this important conversation. There is probably not a community out there that has not been impacted by drowning. And this really opened my eyes to the role that OTs can play in drowning prevention. This is such an important topic, and there are so many resources out there for you to continue learning about drowning prevention. I'll be linking to a bunch of those in the show notes, and I also just want to reiterate that the full protocol for this program will be published in the upcoming months. And in the meantime, you can reach out to Erika if you have any questions. And as always, I want to hear your thoughts and your stories. If you are a casual listener, we'd love a review from you. You can now review us on Google via our homepage, or we just always appreciate your comments on our YouTube video. But the best place to really discuss the implications of all of this is in the OT Potential Club, and I will be watching for your comments in our forum. The OT Potential Club is also where you will go to earn a CEU certificate for your time today. What you are going to do next is head to otpotential.com and either sign in or sign up for the OT Potential Club. Once you are in there, you can take a 5-question test, and when you pass, we will generate a certificate for your time today. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I hope this podcast helps keep you informed and inspired as an OT professional. Take care, and we'll talk next time.